Thank you for watching Creating a Custom Controls Library in Geospatial Portal 2015 from Hexagon Geospatial eTraining. In this video, we'll see how to create a custom library with sample toolbar button and sidebar panel controls in Visual Studio 2013 and compile and run the controls to see the results in the Geospatial Portal. While it is possible to build rich custom features and user interfaces with the JavaScript public API, it is useful to organize more complex projects, such as ours, in a separate Visual Studio project. Our project will be compiled as a separate DLL and will contain all the JavaScript files as embedded resources. This is very similar to the classic ASP.NET Ajax Control Toolkit approach. In the Visual Studio 2013 application, select File, Open, Project Solution, and open Portal SDK application.sln. In the Solution Explorer on the right side of the screen, right-click on the application project and make sure it is set to the Startup project. Right-click on the Portal SDK application solution. From the context menu, select Add New Project. At this point, rather than using any web or ASP.NET specific template, we'll just select a plain class library. In the Add New Project dialog, select Class Library. Type My Extensions for the name of the custom extensions library and click OK. Right-click on My Extensions and click Properties. Select .NET Framework 4 and click Yes. Visual Studio creates the project and generates the sample My Extensions Class 1 class. Now we're going to create sample controls by using the ASP.NET Ajax Control Toolkit approach. It requires adding some boilerplate code and setting JavaScript files to compile as embedded resources. By boilerplate code, we mean the sections of code that have been included in many places with little or no alteration. First, we'll create a custom toolbar button. Rename Class 1 to My Toolbar Button 1. Just above the namespace declaration, type the following code. Visual Studio doesn't have a reference to the Web Resource Assembly attribute. We need to reference System Web and use System Web UI Web Resource attribute. In the Solution Explorer view, right-click on the My Extensions project. Select Add Reference. In the Reference Manager dialog, click Assemblies and add a reference to the System Web and System Web Extensions assemblies and click OK. Add a using directive to access the System Web UI namespace by typing the following. Just over the class definition, type the following. So that Visual Studio will know where to get the required dependencies, we need to add a reference to the Ajax Control Toolkit. In the Solution Explorer, right-click on the My Extensions project and select Add Reference. In the Reference Manager dialog, we'll add a reference to the Ajax Control Toolkit DLL that is in the LIB folder of the Sample Geospatial Portal SDK project. Browse to the LIB folder and to Ajax Control Toolkit DLL. Add a using directive to access the Ajax Control Toolkit namespace by typing the following. In the Reference Manager dialog, we'll add a reference to the ext.js35 DLL that is in the LIB folder of the sample Geospatial Portal SDK project. Browse to the LIB folder and to the ext.js35 DLL. Add a using directive to access the ext.js controls namespace by typing the following. Make component the base class of our new control. Implement the missing parameterless constructor by using HTML text writer tag.span as the parameter for the base class constructor by typing the following. We'll add a reference to Intergraph Web Solutions Core Web Client Controls DLL by browsing to the LIB folder of the project. We'll add a using directive to access the Intergraph Web Solutions Core Web Client Controls namespace by typing the following. We'll have My Toolbar Button 1 implement the IMAP toolbar item interface by typing the following. We'll implement the missing property by typing the following. We have finished with the C# boilerplate part, and now we're ready for the JavaScript implementation. Rename the class to MyToolbarButton1.cs. Right-click on the My Extensions project and select Add, New Item, JavaScript file. Use MyToolbarButton1.js as the name of the file. It is convention for the file name to match the class name. Click Add. In the Solution Explorer, right-click on MyToolbarButton1.js and open its properties. It is very important to set the script's build action to Embedded Resource, otherwise it won't be present in the DLL. To do this, switch the build action from the default value of content to Embedded Resource. Now it's time to use some JavaScript boilerplate code. Everything is wrapped in an immediate function call to make sure that we are not corrupting the global namespace with our local variables. This is code that needs to be present in all extensions that are added in this way. The first line registers the namespace of the control. If your controls are grouped in folders, the namespace and the strings in the C# part should reflect this path. Paste the following. We are creating a JavaScript constructor in which we are calling the initialize base class. Paste the following code. In the next call, we are registering a newly created class with a name that is passed as a string and denoting that it inherits from the ext.js controls component. Paste the following code. In the prototype, we need to add the getExtConfig method, which should return the ext.js library config for this control. Note that it is also possible to build controls that are not using the ext.js library at all. In that case, we would base our control on the Ajax Control Toolkit control base, and instead of using getExtConfig, we would implement the showControl method. But in our example, we are using the ext.js library, so we will paste the following code. We now add the characteristics of the toolbar button to getExConfig. Before a control can be used, we need to make sure that it builds with the other projects. Let's add our MyExtensions library as a reference in the application project. Right-click on the application project in the Solution Explorer. Select Add, Reference, and then Solution. Select My Extensions and click OK. We also need to register it in the web config file in the assembly loader section. Open Web Config and search for Assembly Loader. Append a new add item for My Extensions. Before we can see anything, we need to actually add our control to the page. To do that, we need to open the C# file that is associated with the Examples ASPX page. In Solution Explorer, open Examples ASPX CS and find the Setup Map Toolbar method. Each toolbar item needs to have a category, which you can treat as the tab name for the item to be placed under. You can choose a category from any that are available or create your own. Append to the code. Compile and run the control. We'll run it on Google Chrome without debugging it. Click on My First Toolbar button and confirm that it runs as expected. Now that we have created a custom toolbar button, we will create a sidebar panel. In the Solution Explorer, right-click on My Extensions project and select Add Class. In the Add New Item dialog, Class is selected. For the name, type My Sidebar Panel and click Add. Add the Web Resource attribute. Add a using directive. Add a using directive. Add ext.js using directive. Inherit from ext.js panel. Note that everything in the sidebar panel must be a panel or a derivative of a panel class. Next, we'll add the JavaScript file. In the Solution Explorer, right-click on the project and select Add, New Item, Web, JavaScript file. Name the file mysidebarpanel.js and click Add. Remember to set the build action to Embedded Resource. Right-click on mysidebarpanel.js and select Properties. Set the build action to Embedded Resource. Now we will add some boilerplate JavaScript code to register the control in Geospatial Portal. Everything is wrapped in an immediate function call to make sure that we are not corrupting the global namespace with our local variables. This is code that needs to be present in all extensions that are added in this way. The first line registers the namespace of the control. If your controls are grouped in folders, the namespace and strings in the C# part should reflect this path. In the next call, we are registering a newly created class with a name passed as a string and denoting that it inherits from ext.js controls panel. We are creating a JavaScript constructor in which we are calling initializeBase class. Fill in the getExtConfig method. Now select the My Sidebar Panel CS tab. Add a client script resource attribute. Our control is almost ready. To use it in the ASPX, we need to register the tag prefix in the web config file and instantiate the control in Examples ASPX within the sidebar control. From the Solution Explorer, open Web Config. Search for tag prefix, which tells ASPX which assembly and namespace it should reference when it sees a certain prefix. Add this code. Navigate to Sidebar and add this code. We'll now compile and run the new sidebar panel. Thank you for watching this e-training module from Hexagon Geospatial. For more e-training, please visit hexagongeospatial.com/e-training.